Good morning, everyone. Good to see you again.
Good morning.
We're looking again at daily devotions from Tim Chester's The Glory of the Cross, published by the Good Book Company. And there's the number there. Any resources they produce are excellent. Encourage you to use them for good books that'll encourage you in your Christian walk. Today we're looking at a devotion from John chapter 6, verses 1 to 21, and Jen's going to read it for us.
Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he had performed on the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover feast was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go amongst so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and the men sat down, about 5,000 of them. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they'd all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the miraculous sign that Jesus did, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed 3 or 3.5 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were terrified. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading.
Thanks, Jen. This is Tim Chester. A man walks into a bar, orders a drink, and joins the conversation of the regulars. At one point, a man shouts out, "Number 7." Everyone laughs. Moments later, someone else shouts out, "Number 27." More laughter. When an old man shouts, "Number 33," the place erupts. The man asks the barman, "What's going on?" You see, we got so used to hearing the same old jokes again and again that we decided to give each one a number. It saves time. So the man decides to give it a go. He shouts out, "Number 10." Nothing. Just an awkward silence. He casts a quizzical look at the barman. The barman shrugs. It's the way you tell him. Well, John tells 2 stories in John 6. A story of Jesus miraculously feeding more than 5,000 people, and a story of Jesus walking on the lake. But for those who know the history of Israel, John has embedded clues that evoke other stories for which Jesus is the punchline. After the feeding of the 5,000, the crowd get it. "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world," they say, verse 14. They can spot that this is a repeat of the time when Moses fed the Israelites with manna from heaven on their journey out of slavery in Egypt, Exodus 16. They remember the promise of a new Moses-like prophet, Deuteronomy 18, verse 18. Then on the lake, Jesus says, "It is I, don't be afraid." It's literally, "I am," and it echoes God's words in Isaiah 43. "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Do not be afraid, for I am with you." And what is Isaiah talking about in Isaiah 43? He's looking ahead to a new exodus out of captivity in Babylon. Add it all up, and what do you get? Jesus is a new Moses leading a new exodus. Just to make sure you don't miss it, John begins these stories by saying, the Jewish Passover festival was near, John 6 verse 4. It's a somewhat random comment unless John wants to cue us up to see that Jesus is a new Moses leading a new Exodus with a new Passover sacrifice. At the first Passover, Israelite families killed a lamb and daubed its blood on the doorframes of their homes. That night the Lord killed every firstborn child in Egypt, but the Lord passed over the houses daubed with blood, and the children inside were spared. Pharaoh was forced to release God's enslaved people. John uses this story to interpret the death of Jesus. Jesus is going to free us from the slavery of sin and the threat of death by becoming the ultimate Passover lamb. Under the protection of his blood, we escape God's judgment and are set free to be his people. John shouts out Exodus 16, Deuteronomy 18, Isaiah 43, and we reply, got it, and erupt with praise. And he's got a meditation from Thomas Kelly. Glory, glory everlasting be to him who bore the cross, who redeemed our souls by tasting death, the death deserved by us. Spread his glory, who redeemed his people thus. While we hear the wondrous story of the Saviour's cross and shame, sing we everlasting glory be to God and to the Lamb. Saints and angels, give ye glory to his name. That was written by Thomas Kelly, 1769 to 1854. Well, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.